ISO IEC 27001 as a possible tool for NIS2 compliance. For many organizations, NIS2 is first and foremost an obligation. It brings deadlines, responsibilities, oversight, and board-level attention. But one important question is raised very quickly by senior leaders. All right, we need to comply, but what operating system can this be built on in a stable way? What is the framework that treats compliance not as a one-off project, but as a lasting, manageable, and auditable way of organizational operation? One of the strongest answers to that question is ISO IEC 27001. In many cases, this standard is not the legal compliance requirement itself, and it does not replace local or sector-specific obligations. But it does offer something else of real value: the possibility for the organization to establish an information security management system that brings order to risks, controls, responsibilities, decisions, and evidence. That is exactly what an organization needs when it starts on the path towards NIS2 compliance. Because NIS2 does not simply ask whether there is a firewall, whether backups exist, or whether there is an incident management procedure. The real question is whether the organization can operate these areas in a way that is management approved, risk-based, documented, and verifiable. At that point, ISO IEC 27001 is no longer just a standard. It becomes a management tool. Most organizations do not face difficulty because they have no protection at all. They face difficulty because their existing measures do not form one coherent system. There may be some technical controls, some policies, some assigned responsibilities, and some good practices. But there is no single, shared governance logic behind them. In that situation, every new requirement becomes a separate project, every audit brings a new request for documents, and every incident raises the same questions again. Who decided? Who was responsible? What had been defined? And how can we prove that the organization was operating in a controlled way? This is where ISO IEC 27001 creates order. It does not prescribe a single technology. It does not mandate one specific software solution. And it does not try to impose a rigid checklist of controls on every organization. Instead, it says this: establish a management system, define a clear scope, carry out risk assessment, select and justify controls, assign roles, document what matters, perform management review, and commit to continual improvement. From a leadership perspective, that is extremely valuable. Because leadership does not primarily need technical detail. It needs manageability. It needs to understand which information, systems, and processes are critical, where the greatest risks are, which controls protect business operations, who is accountable, and which decisions need to be made. The governance logic of NIS2 aligns closely with this, because the management body cannot remain outside the cybersecurity discussion. That is why it is important to understand that ISO IEC 27001 is not only a standard for information security specialists. It is also an organizational language through which leadership and specialist functions can finally speak about the same issues in the same way. When a functioning ISMS is in place, cybersecurity is no longer a series of isolated technical initiatives. It becomes a managed leadership domain. In a well-designed ISO IEC 27001 system, everything starts with context. What do we need to protect? Which processes are critical? Which systems would stop operations if they failed? Which suppliers do we depend on? How much risk are we consciously willing to accept? And what do we want to reduce through controls? This way of thinking is very close to the core of NIS2, because NIS2 also expects risk-based measures, not merely formal gestures of compliance. One of the greatest strengths of ISO IEC 27001 is that it turns into a system what many organizations have previously managed only in isolated parts. Risk assessment, governance, incident management, access management, the supplier perspective, awareness, and monitoring are all brought together within one structure. This is especially important in the context of NIS2, because compliance does not depend on a single control. The organization must think at the same time about prevention, detection, response, recovery, and demonstrability. ISO IEC 27001 does not only organize controls into a system, it also organizes accountability. For leadership, this is a critical issue. In the era of NIS2, it is no longer enough to say that security tasks have simply been assigned. The real management question is whether those tasks have been built into the organization's governance model. Is there a decision-making forum? Is there risk prioritization? Is there regular review? A well-functioning ISO IEC 27001 system can provide a far stronger answer to these questions. ISO IEC 27001 is also a strong choice because it encourages the organization not merely to document the current state, but to improve how it operates over time. Is the system working? Are the controls effective? Have the risks changed? Has the organization learned from events? This continual improvement mindset is what makes ISO IEC 27001 especially valuable in the world of NIS2, because the security of digital operations requires constant management attention. In practice, the greatest strength of ISO IEC 27001 is not that it allows an organization to tick a box. Its real strength is that it connects risk, control, accountability, documentation, oversight, and improvement. When that connection exists, compliance no longer appears as a separate obligation. It becomes part of the company's management system. It gives structure to risk, order to responsibility, discipline to operations, and a stable foundation for ensuring that NIS2 compliance is not a one-off campaign, but a sustainable organizational practice. If this had to be summarized in a single leadership statement, it would sound like this. NIS2 defines the mandatory objective, while ISO IEC 27001 helps build the operating system through which that objective can be achieved in practice. That is why ISO IEC 27001 is not merely a standard, not merely an audit matter, and not merely a certification project. It is a possible tool for NIS2 compliance. And for many organizations, it may be the most effective internationally recognized management system for applying information security good practice in a structured and sustainable way. Thank you for your attention.